Hello, Grace. How are you today?
Hi, really good. What about you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Welcome to our listeners and today's episode of Can You See What I See? It's Vicky Scott here, and today my co-host, Grace Hart, is actually going to ask me some questions about projects, and I often talk about me being a project manager and how I do life. So quite nervously and excitedly, I'm going to hand over to Grace.
I'm glad you said the nervous and then, actually, maybe I'm just excited. Because we can get those confused, hey?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you always say to me privately, and we have talked about it a little bit with the podcast, but that our life is our greatest project. And I know that you literally do that for a job, as in the past you've done Corroboree 2000 and a few other projects. And I just thought that it would be lovely to hear from your point of view what makes, a great project manager and how we can sort of bring that into our own personal life as well. Because I'm sure not everyone listening is a project manager, but yet what you say is that they are, right? I mean, they've got their life and that's a bunch of projects.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to give our listeners some background to that, I was project manager for Corroboree 2000, which was where 250,000 people walked over Sydney Harbour Bridge in support of reconciliation. And it was more than 12, 15 months in the planning where we closed Sydney Harbour Bridge for 7 hours, and a lot of people and 3 different levels of government and a lot of community organisations from all around the country were involved. So it hadn't been done before, so there was no blueprint for it. So it did take on let's see where this takes us.
Yes, but I'm curious, when you were asked to be the project manager for that, what was that like? And just because, as you said, it's never been done before.
Yeah, it was actually, my first reaction was fantastic.
Oh, so good.
Because I know, I was so excited about the vision for a start. It was the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation's vision. And it was just, okay, let's have a walk over Sydney Harbour Bridge and let's just see how many people do actually support this thing we call reconciliation.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, okay, this is something practical we can all do in some way. And so it was great. And I was lucky enough to have people like Linda Burney and Ray Martin, who actually were the council. Linda wasn't on the council at the time, but she had been, and she had shared this vision for all the years she was on the council herself.
Wow.
So, and she lived in Sydney, as did Ray Martin, so they knew the local lie of the land, and I knew that we all shared that same vision. So, but I also started to see that I had some gifts that I had built up over a lifetime that had put me in this place at this point in time.
Yeah.
So I have to say it was exciting for me. Yeah.
And what was the moment like for you when you actually saw it? So it's gone from the vision and all those months of putting it in place with everyone around you. When you actually saw it, what was that like for you?
I actually cried.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Yeah, I think I would have too. There'd been a lot of leakage.
I was standing up on the bridge and there were no cars. We'd closed the bridge, and I looked back, and as far as I could see, there were people and behind and in front of me. And I went, oh, my hat, we've done it. We've done it.
Yeah.
And it was the time too when there was a plane that came up into the sky and did skywriting with the word sorry on it.
No, I remember that.
And I think that was when I cried. It was like, oh, my hat, there's somebody else, because we didn't do that. It was some individual who did that. I thought they bought into the vision.
Well, I was just going to say you invited us all to look at this, and I'm teary, because it's a beautiful thing when you create something that generates a possibility, and for people to actually have a voice and to be heard and to actually visually see just, the thousands and thousands. Do you know, I mean, you said 250, it seemed like a heck more than that when I saw it. I know we're still talking about it today, even though it was in 2000, but how did you feel about the ongoing change, as far as other people were stepping up and writing things in the sky and, coming forward as well? Like, it brought in a whole new discussion, didn't it? Kept it going.
Well, yeah, it did. And I have to say that there was a time when I felt very down about it, because I thought, well, yeah, what difference has this made in the daily lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples? And because we still had the same stats, everything else nothing much seemed to have changed that I could see. And then one day I read a story in a paper somewhere that it was about an Aboriginal woman who had caught the train up from Wollongong, and she said she really tossed up and down whether she would do it because she was so angry and she was still so impacted by the policies of, what had happened to our First Nations people. Yes. And anyway, so she said when she decided to come, and when she stood on the bridge and saw the sorry, she said she cried, and she said someone cares, because she was taken as a child, had never met her parents. They died before she could find out who they were and where they were, and they had died. So she, her whole life had been ripped apart by our nation and its policies. So that gave me heart to think, well, that made a difference, not just in that woman's life, but in the life of her family and their families. So I thought it is a ripple effect, and it's not up to us to decide what that
how that shows up. Yeah, I mean, of course, exactly. I mean, in a perfect world, would love to see stats change. Sooner rather than later. In a horrible time. However, I really do get that it couldn't. What you created opened up, I think, a lot of people's hearts and a lot of people to what had actually happened and the wounding, and just the sorry broke me. Like, I'm still crying even now. Like, it's just. Sometimes that's it, you just want someone to say, I'm sorry, that just to not feel alone. And it's a beautiful thing when they can receive that, to know that people care. But yes, I'm all for actual, change as well. What would it take, right?
Yeah, well, we talked once before about what some of the basic needs that we all have, and one of them is that interdependence, and part of that means that we can't do this on our own. We actually, it all comes down to relationships, and you cannot have a relationship unless it's built on respect and trust.
Yeah.
And you can only develop those when you're willing to get out of your own head and come from your heart, and be willing to listen to somebody else's experience. So you might say, but that's not true. That's not how it happened. It's irrelevant. Stop trying to defend. And I sort of got away from that place of, oh my God, I'm continuing to try to defend what was good about it. I think, why can't we just be with people? I know myself, when I've been in that place of pain for some reason, and somebody tries to tell me, it's not that bad, or, that there are other things that have happened as a result that are good. And I mean, you know what? I know all that at a head level. I know all that. But I have a basic need now just for that understanding. And I want somebody to be able to say, you know what? Yeah, I can see you're in pain. That's all it takes. I'm really sorry. And not to say, people say it's not up to me, I didn't do that in relation to corroboree. The long and short of that is we're still living with the benefits of what happened when we took over the land of Aboriginal people. So, we continue to benefit because there was never a treaty, and the relationship between us is still in that place of healing. Consequently, even in Queensland, we're still having discussions about, well, what would a treaty look like? So, until we're willing to come from our hearts and not our heads, then I don't think we're destined for any sort of true relationship until then. So, but Grace, you talked before about, in terms of my life and my project. Why I say that about my life is the biggest project is that it has a beginning and it has an end. We're all born and we all die. There are two things that we know are going to happen. So the only thing we've got is this space in between the birth and the death. And we continue to have found some reason to think death is bad or death is tragic or death is sad, whereas none of us are guaranteed anything. Each of us are a unique soul. And, I read somewhere recently about, only when you find your why or, what's your purpose, and if you find this, then you can live accordingly. But, we've grown up with these beliefs that purpose has to be something grand or whatever, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something quite simple and humble. And one thing I missed is that the point of purpose is not to feed our ego, it is to feed our soul. And when we accept we're more than a body, we use expressions like mind, body, soul, and the religious people amongst us who follow a particular religion, it's a faith, and I was raised Catholic and it worked for me in those years. That's all I knew. I grew up like that. And I used the words, mind, body, spirit, etc. But it didn't really I didn't get what that meant until I got much older. And then I came to see the difference in the feeling about when you talk about coming from your heart or your soul. And to me, that sort of meant about, and I guess, I found out along the way, and probably corroboree was one of them, that our soul comes into physical existence to express something. And that is what I came to see is probably called our gift. We all have our own unique gifts and talents. Some of us have many, but there'll be a dominant one. And, we all have that gift. And what if sharing that gift is our purpose? What if it's as simple as that? So, we go off thinking, right, if society wants us to go to school, get educated, go to TAFE, get a trade, go to uni, get a degree, and then you start to get into the status, the position, the power, and that has its place. I'm not saying that, but what if the way we pursue that is just all around a superficial thing? But it's not really about that thing that comes from deep within all of us. And I got to see that with corroboree because I just had a deep knowing that was going to be successful. But right up until the day before, it was hard work, let me tell you. We had the politics of white on black and black on black and different layers of government and what I found, what I learnt was everybody had their own agenda. And, I found my role was, people call me the glue because, it's an interesting thing, but I got to see, that's my gift. I can actually be present with people and to see what's important to them without making a judgment, and then looking like, okay, well, here's a common vision. If you were to get your needs met, what would that look like in relation to this vision? So everybody, and I remember going to community groups where they wanted to march against what was the John Howard government then, and he didn't support practical reconciliation. So things like a walk over bridge, it was not on his. He just gave it no credibility at all. And they wanted to say there's all these leftover promises that had never been met and things hadn't worked. And I said, look, would it work for you if you can march? We're all going to march. We're all going to say which is important to us. If you can have your plaque, you can have your banners, but could you do it in peace so that we could all have our say and we can tell the nation this is still important. This is not fixed yet. So we're not trying to say we're happy, we're reconciled. We know it's an ongoing challenge, which to me is again about our own personal lives, because there is no one end. There'll be parts of our life that is a separate project, and they're all separate projects because one will be your health, one will be, all those things about how do you choose what it is you want to do, and how do you be true to fulfilling on your own dreams and goals and values and working out what they are and what sits with you at a deep level within your soul. And some people, I don't know, there are other language about soul, but for me it's like so long as it comes from our heart and not our head is another way, I guess. But I don't know. What's your thought?
I've got so many things swirling around in my awareness right now. And the first one I would love to touch on is when you talked about the glue. And, what for me, one of the skills, whether you're a project manager or not, because as you say so beautifully, everyone's managing projects, whether it's their kids or their job or, their routine that week or whatever. There's just a multitude of projects that we're all sort of managing. And when you talked about the glue, I got a really beautiful sense of when you have parties that want to be separate, want to do the right and the wrong or the polarity. If you imagine glue coming in, the glue is touching both of those sides, so to speak, which then creates no more separation. So, they're saying, we don't want to do this, or this is right and this is wrong. And then you come in as the glue and you're actually the space between those two energies. However, because you're spread out and touching both, they're actually touching each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly it.
Yeah. And I just got, because it's like osmosis, it's like as soon as you came in as the glue, they couldn't help but be in communion with each other, whether they liked it or not, because there's glue's there, right? And what I'm loving when I heard what you said is, for me, as long as we're in polarity, we're going to have war, because there's the right and the wrong and the good and the bad. And when you lose that and bring in the energy of allowance, there's such a gift with that. So allowance is not accepting it. Allowance is not making it right or wrong. It's just actually taking the gloves off and allowing the information to come from, the quote unquote other side, the wrong side. And when you've got that, when you've taken off the gloves and you're just this space of allowance, willing to allow the information to come through, there's a spaciousness and a kindness that what I've noticed is that, the quote unquote other side softens, because there's no longer a fight. But as soon as, you say they're right or they're wrong, it's going to make one party wrong at some point. And so when I'm listening to you, when you had these people saying, it's not fixed and we want to fight, and rightly so, I totally get that. It's the woundedness is very much still there, and there's things that do need to still change even now. However, you being who you were, that glue, took it from a fight to what would you like to create, and how can you be heard in a way that's expansive and generative and creative, versus just, because we all know as soon as you make someone wrong, what are they going to do? Unless they've got a lot of consciousness and awareness, they're going to come up against you. They're going to fight back. They're going to go into reason and justification, and then it just starts this war, So you've obviously talked about that, but if I said to you, how do you manage conflict? The different personalities that come up, what goes on for you? Because as you said, you had a lot of different personalities, different groups, different sides of politics, a lot of woundedness. How do you manage that?
Well, the first thing for me, and I think this is why I know it's a gift of mine, because it came naturally, and it was like I didn't have to go into my head and think, now, hang on, what's the theory? What am I supposed to do now?
Right. It's just who you be.
It's got to come first. It is just who you be. And, I went to a lot of meetings. And people think, oh, yeah, it's a waste of time, or, it's cost a lot of money and whatever else. But let me tell you, it wasn't just with Corroboree. I also coordinated CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government for Queensland Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, but I coordinated Queensland Government's role in that. And it was just before September 11 as well, which created another impact as well. But it was no different. People almost resisted and resented the fact that I wanted to meet with people. I wanted people to talk. And I realised that, because again, people saw me as the glue. By then, after Corroboree, I had seen the value of having a person who was the glue. And it's like it's a safe place. And it didn't matter whether it was the Premier's office or it was somebody at the grassroots level who had a business who was going to be impacted by having to close all the roads or all the motorcades or whatever it was. Somebody had somewhere to go where they knew their concerns could be expressed without being shut down.
And I was just going to say, truly heard. That's one of your gifts, is that you truly listen. I mean, a lot of people, when they are quote unquote listening, really what they're doing is just coming up with their next question or their next thing or their argument. They're not really truly receiving the information from that other person. And you do that.
Well, that's only come through experience, because before I got to that place of valuing my gift, which was coming from my soul level, I didn't value that, because I grew up in an era and I was working in Prime Minister's department where everybody had a degree or three, and I didn't. So I made it mean I wasn't good enough, I didn't know enough, was all those sorts of things. And it was only when I could see that, hang on, unless we build a relationship with these people, then it's not going to work. So I was able to leave my own ego aside, and I didn't have language for this back then. But as I got older, I see that, ego is just that thing about we've been made to think if I don't say or do this, then people aren't going to think I know enough, or and it all comes back to our own stuff about are we good enough? Do we think we're smart enough? Do we think we're, and even, I worked with a lot of people with all those qualifications, but they didn't know how to have a communication and actually say, hang on, what are we trying to do? And why is this important? And they were the two biggest questions, because once I could get those, just ask that, hang on, what do you want and why do you want that? And when they could answer that, most people couldn't answer that when I first asked those questions, because they went straight to that polarity of being right or right than someone else. Yeah. So it was like having to, first of all, get through this thing about, hang on, they're wrong and they can't see. So, okay, what if we were to create this space? And, I know people who, similar to I am, don't have degrees, don't have, qualifications that could stand up like a project manager's, a master in project management. I actually did start doing that at QUT, and I have to say I lost a little bit of interest, because the way I learn is to learn in the practical sense. And so I wanted to actually get out there and do it, whereas rather than go and learn the theory first, I'd already learnt the theory about how to make a project work, through corroboree and CHOGM.
Yeah.
So, and it was interesting that they used corroboree as one of the examples in a university textbook
Oh,
for
that's
event
funny.
management. It is funny. So then all of these things started to make me think, oh, hang on, there might be some value in this. But because no one else was valuing it with money, as in, they didn't, couldn't see, they all wanted to know, well, what's your qualification? Well, this is it. These are my runs on the board, basically. So, and that taught me a lot, I guess, about, you talk about how, why is that so, in my head, I always have, it's sort of like a 4-step process, I guess. And one is getting really clear on the vision. And they're the sorts of questions about, well, what do you want and why do you want it? And you get everybody on that, answering those. So
instead of the right and the wrong conversation or the polarity conversation, it's actually a creation and questions.
It is creation.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's a very different language. And
totally different.
Until, and when I say I was the glue, I didn't have any of the knowledge, but what I did have was a deep gut sense of, yep, that's going to help us achieve this. And I knew straight away if somebody said something, it was like, oh, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Or, hang on, let's explore that some more.
Yeah.
And so it was, and I remember once we were in a meeting with lots of people in Sydney in the early days, and somebody said, but listen, you can't shut the bridge. 7 hours. They were talking 4 hours at that point. You can't shut the bridge. That's going to just disrupt Sydney.
Everything.
And then some young man said, but isn't that the point of this exercise?
Exactly.
Don't we want to
a pattern break?
Conversation?
Change tracks, literally.
Let's just change tracks. And that was like, oh my hat.
Yeah.
That was one of those aha moments for me about how do we think outside the box here? What else is possible?
Yeah. So,
but then,
sorry, go.
Sorry. I just want to say in that early part is we all need to think about what our gift is. And, what is it that we think, we can help achieve that? And for all of us to get clear about, that's very well, but what would that look like when I achieve it? So people say, this is my vision. But when you actually say to them, well, look, can you say some more to me about what would that look like? If we have actually achieved that vision, what would you and I be doing and what would our clients be doing and da-da-da? That often stops people in their tracks because they haven't thought that far ahead.
And if you think about just even relationships, husband and wife or whatever, when they're talking about their, gripes with each other, that's the right and the wrong, right? Instead of what is your vision for the relationship? What are you aware of when you are with this person? What can you generate and create? And when you get that vision, then what's it going to create? You talking about the toilet seat left up and down, or the towels on the floor, or whatever. I hear often from people. It stops you in your tracks, going, wow, hang on a minute. What would it create if we had this conversation when my vision is actually a communion and a generation and creation with this person?
Well, you just summed it up, Grace. You start to see it's those little things in life that are actually the things that are going to create the big things.
Yeah, it's not the one vision to rule them all, like with Lord of the Rings. It's actually, there's lots of little mini choices that made that walk across the bridge happen, right?
Absolutely. And did it look anything quite like I saw at the beginning? No.
Oh, that's actually really good to acknowledge.
But you know what? It was actually better. Because by the time we got there...
And got out of your way, everyone's way, as in you allowed the process to actually create and generate itself versus the control.
Exactly. We got out of the control mode and thought, well, hang on, how can we create something that is out of the box here, basically?
Yeah, and you did. And that's why we're still talking about it, 22 years later. It was remarkable.
I think what it was is individuals took ownership of it.
Yeah.
So we had individuals coming from all around the country because they had valued it in their own communities and they wanted to be part of the national statement. And so most of those people, you know, I didn't know them from a bar of soap. They wouldn't know me from a bar of soap. But did it matter? No, because we all got to express that bigger, you know, that
It's
what
the
we
kingdom
wanted
of
for our
we.
country.
You know, it was a true kingdom of we. Lots of different we's. You know? Yeah. And the other thing that you said that I do want to acknowledge is you talked about becoming aware of your gifts, talents and abilities. And as you said so beautifully, it's most likely something you might downplay because it's just who you are. And you don't see it as a gift, talent and ability. Doesn't everyone have that? No. But the other thing that you mentioned is that you actually acknowledged it. You actually acknowledged the value of your gifts, talents and abilities. And I wanted to speak to that because when you acknowledge something, it allows you to become greater than that. And when you don't acknowledge it, then can other people truly commit to you in that way? So what I mean by, if you hadn't acknowledged your gifts as a project manager, for example, could anyone else have seen that in you? And it's when you are willing to acknowledge it, you step into it, then other people can contribute to that because they see it, because you're seeing it. And then you can actually become even greater because you've acknowledged it. Whereas if you don't acknowledge it, can you truly step into it or even beyond it?
You know, you're so right. You know, as I said, I had that I'm not good enough thing.
We all do.
Of my life.
Yeah.
We have it in some form. We cover it up
absolutely.
By getting more degrees or getting whatever. But at the end of the day, it still comes back to, like you said, Oprah says most of her people, including the president.
She said She actually said everyone. It was every single person. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I interrupted.
Did I do okay? That was their question to her.
Yeah.
Did I do okay?
Yeah, when the recording stopped.
Wants affirmation.
Yes, validation, acknowledgement. Yeah. And it starts with giving it to yourself, you know.
Well, because I just had this knowing that this was going to work, and I didn't know how, but I just knew it was. So I trusted that innate gut feeling I had, and one day at a time, I just kept doing it, and I had to really. Some of my beliefs were challenged over that time, where I actually had to look at whether they were still serving me. So I was undergoing a personal transformation at the same time as being a project manager.
I'm going to jump in on that too, because you see, for me, a leader is someone who comes into, whether it's a meeting or, you know, whether you're the project manager or whatever it is, with a willingness to change. You know, so they're not coming in with, this is it, I'm right, I've got the vision, you'll do what that power and control that's I've seen a lot of people do, whether it's in intimate relationships or in a situation with, you know, as a project. But if a leader comes in with, hey, you know, this is the vision I see and I'd like to hear from you, you know, and there's this openness and willingness to change, because that what you said so beautifully is you allowed everybody to be heard, and you weren't in a position of power and control of righteousness. You were actually saying, this is what I see. However, what do you know? What can you share? And I remember the time when you said to me, oh, you know, we were told the bridge might collapse because of, can you speak to that? I won't do it justice, but that was funny. I mean, not funny, not funny.
Yeah. During that preparation time, there had been a bridge overseas where there was a big demonstration, and people had come from opposite ends of the bridge. And when bridges, you know, and the engineering in them, they're not geared to get certain vibrations. Anyway, this bridge overseas collapsed, and a lot of people fell into the water and some drowned. And so then, of course, this was in the news in Australia, and there were people talking about, okay, well, unless you give us this, we're going to come from the other end of the bridge and we're going to do this. And it was scary because, you know, you can imagine you then have a vision of the Sydney Harbour Bridge collapsing.
That's right. That does not, probably not your best choice.
Not a happy thought. And bear in mind, politically, we're 3 months out from the Sydney Olympics. So then we have the New South Wales government saying we can't afford to have demonstrations in the city just before we have the International eyes upon us.
Yeah.
So they got nervous, and should we go ahead with the walk and da-da-da. So, it's... Sorry, I forgot your question.
So have I. I was just really more talking about how the walking across the bridge and how do you deal with that, when you hear that news as a project manager?
That was when I went and talked to the groups, and they were the ones that were talking about coming from the other end and said, hey, how is there a way we can do this together and both have our own needs met? And they were fantastic, I have to say. They were relieved to see that somebody was willing to say, okay, you can do this and we'll do that and we'll give you the platform, but we ask that you respect that and treat this in a way that it's done peacefully. And that worked.
Yeah, I'm just also hearing, for me with, domestic violence and trauma, we talk about the traumatic parts, the dissociative parts, and how what they really desire is to feel safe, secure and supported. And as I'm hearing you speak, on what your gifts, talents and abilities are as a project manager, you've got the vision, you're allowing the kingdom of we, people are being truly heard. You're asking questions that create and generate versus bring people into polarity and right and wrong. And then I just got that acknowledgement that when you speak to people, they feel safe, secure and supported, because no matter who we are, I heard Ricky Gervais say the next pandemic is going to be anxiety. And, I'm putting my hand up saying, hallelujah, because that is already what's happening, but it's just going to get so much worse. And when you were dealing with all these personalities, there's trauma there, and there's your gift to bring people together and for them to feel safe, secure and supported, so that they can come out of right and wrong and actually look at what we can create together. That's the gift. And for me, if we can do that individually with our kids or our business and ourselves, how often are we making ourselves wrong or in judgment of who we are or judgment of our bodies? And what if we actually were that space of, kindness where we are safe, secure, we're in allowance, so we can actually create change with our bodies or create change with our relationships with ourselves and others. So I'm just celebrating you because I'm starting to see, what makes you such a great project manager.
Oh, thank you. But let me say, one of the things about being a project manager is the first lesson is you can't do it on your own. And you said this before about we need to actually get some dolphins, as you call them, or mentors or people who want something greater for us than, want something for us that maybe we can't even see yet. We haven't been to the top of the mountain where we can see what's possible. So we want someone to help us see that vision that something else is possible. And that could be their gift, but they could see something in us. And, I know with Ray Martin, he was such an angel for me at that time, because after the walk was over, we all met up in the room over at Darling Harbour, and he stood up and thanked everybody involved, but he said, I think we'd all be in agreement that none of this would have happened if it wasn't for Vicky Scott.
Yeah.
Well, that really blew my mind, because I had no sense of, really? What? So for me, it was just like I just took daily steps every day, every hour almost, for 18 months just about, my poor family. I couldn't have done it if they weren't holding the fort back home. And you can't do anything in isolation, and that brings me back to that. It all comes back to the circle. And this is the project management, probably if we might finish it on this, is every project has the beginning and the end, but as soon as you've finished the end, the last part of it is to look at, well, what worked well? What could we have done differently? What didn't work well or what failed. You can use that language if you like, so long as you don't make it mean you failed.
Exactly, yeah.
But, and so what are you going to do then with those results that you've produced, and what do I want now? So it starts to become a circle, and you start to see that, I acknowledge this and this worked. Now, what do I want next? and the same thing, and you hone it. So over my 60-odd years, I've actually I didn't know what I was doing, but I was honing these project management skills as I went. And I now am at a stage to know, you know what, I can see what else is possible, but I also know I don't have to do this myself. I just have to use my gifts and my talents and contribute those to something else where if someone else has a vision, I think, oh, I like that. Oh, yeah, I wonder what I could do to support that. So it then means, doesn't matter how old you are, sometimes it's just holding the space for someone younger to get on and do it. And I love that. You know, even just watching little 9-year-old grandson this morning at the beach, he came up to me and he said, Danny, I just saw this little boy sitting over there on the wall and he looked a bit lonely. So I went up to him and I just started asking him what he was doing here and what his name was. And he said, and he started to talk to me and he said, he just reminded me of my friend Carlisle who had to go back to New Zealand. And he said, we had a great chat. It was really nice. And I thought, oh, wow, you know, that boy has a gift of connection.
Yeah.
So now we can make it mean, and oh, that's really nice, Brax, and give him a pat on the head and he can do it again in a more and more artificial way and because he knows he's going to get brownie points. Or we can say, you know, things to him, oh, and so, you know, how did that make you? He said, I felt really good. And I said, and how do you think it made your cousin feel when you walked away from her because you left her to go and make someone else happy? And he went, oh, I didn't realise I did that. I said, no problem, just be aware. And he went, oh, okay, and off they trotted and did their thing. But that's the role we can play as elders, is not by making people right and wrong, but just helping them get true to themselves and not become who they think other people want them to be, where they get kicks and brownie points and accolades, and then they start to get out of their soul level and they get into their head because they know it's going to give them it'll give them stuff, or it'll give them money, or it'll give them something else that they think is going to buy happiness. It'll give them choice, but we know it doesn't buy happiness. So that still comes back to something you can get each and every day coming from the soul level. So that's my take on My Life, My Project.
I love it. And, you know, when you talked about finding a mentor, one of the things that I love so beautifully, you know, you're always aware of, you know, contributing to other people. And what I have noticed for myself is, you know, you've got to step into the arena. You know, you've got to say yes to that project, or yes. And when you do, the dolphins come. And until then, they're kind of circling around because they can't really see you because you haven't seen yourself, right? But the minute you sort of start to acknowledge yourself, you're actually swimming in the arena and they're going, wow, great. You know, how can I contribute? How can I? And that's when you get, you know, people like Ray Martin saying, which I thoroughly agree with, by the way, that wouldn't have happened without you, not biased in any way. And I also loved what you said about, you know, it's a circle, but as soon as you're sort of coming toward the end, there's no actual end. And so you get the energy and you bounce off into what else can you create and what else can you know, is sort of asking for an energy to, you know, to generate and create. And I loved when you said that as well. And then when you talked about Brax, you know, this is the thing that I'm personally really passionate about. It's, you know, to not, you know, educate our children to just be autopilot responders, like do this and you get your brownie points. And, you know, it can take them away from their essence, their, you know, their infinite self. And so and I love just asking questions, you know, questions with no agenda and questions with no point of view. And so they can actually choose what's true for them, not how we would like them to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's the homework? Yeah. I'm going to throw it at you this week.
Well,
getting there.
You know, I think it would be good for each of us just to take a few moments to think about where somebody has said, you know, you're so good at that, or you will know, you know, again, if you get out of your head and try and label it, don't label it. This is the big thing, because it's probably something that hasn't got a name just yet. in my case, it took me 30 years to see that, oh, yes, I do have this gift of being the glue, for want of a better word, or to be a bridge between, different points of view. Doesn't matter what the label is. You will know the feeling, and you will know whether it feels great because it'll be generative. It'll feel creative. And you'll see that it doesn't, anyway, you know what I'm saying. I think if individuals can actually look at, again, shine the light just on you. Don't look at others around you. You might use someone as an example about, and you could do that for a start. What do you see in others that they can't actually see for themselves, that's not in a qualification that you get a piece of paper for? What's their gift?
Yeah, what do you admire about others? Because if you can admire it, you can see it. And if you see it, you're most likely being it. Maybe you haven't acknowledged it. And the other thing that came when you just talked about that was Simon Sinek. He talks about the why. And one of the things he says to help you work out your why is to talk to somebody that absolutely cares about you, not an intimate partner. But so, for example, I would talk to you. Someone that knows me really well, that I really do love and trust, and ask them, why are we friends? And he says, initially you'll get the blah, blah, like, oh, you're fun, or you're this, you're that, or, and then you say, yeah, but there's other people that are that. So why me? And you just keep on going, but that's great. But what else? What else? And he says, you keep on asking until, you get the goosebumps, until you get that moment where maybe you tear up when they say what they say. And so I thought to do it with my closest friend. And so, she started with the more superficial stuff. And I said, yeah, other people have that, like, so what else? What else? And she then said, I can be all of me and you're never going to judge me. And it's safe. It's actually, I'm safe to say anything and be anything. And I teared up. And so, look at, and that wasn't the only thing she said, and I've spoken to other people. I might just do that with you one day. We'll do it for each other. But it's a lovely thing when you can get to what is it about you that you probably just don't even think about that can actually create and generate massively for you.
Absolutely. And we all need more space. You talked about the next pandemic being anxiety. Well,
yeah, I would say trauma, but yeah, he said anxiety, and I definitely agree with that.
Well, anxiety comes as a result of trauma, doesn't it?
Correct.
When you start to dig down. But
yep.
They're all about needs not being fulfilled. So, the more we talk about what our basic needs are, and that comes down, that's another way of getting to, hang on, what's my gift here? So anyway, they're all different conversations.
Now you've opened up Pandora's box for me, so because
make that another one.
We definitely need to do something on need and needy. Yes, because they're very, very different energies.
Big different.
Yes.
Different, yeah. All right, my sweet.
Yeah.
And Grace, I just want to say thank you. You said it before. You wanted to ask me about this because you see something in me.
Yeah.
But to me, that's just normal.
Yeah, I know. And it's so not normal. It's miraculous.
My point is, we can do this for others around us in our life. And
good point.
We need to do it more and more. And so I just think that if it is going to be anxiety and trauma and all of that, the impacts of trauma, then something we can do each and every day is talk to someone. Say, I just want to tell you what I see in you.
Oh, I just love that. Can you get that energy? Imagine that flowing across the universe, and around our planet. Because there's nothing more beautiful than being received. There really isn't. There's nothing more beautiful than being truly received without being right and wrong. Yeah.
Absolutely. And women will do it more than men, in my experience, because that men have a different purpose in life, and it's a bigger question. But it's not so common for them to open their heart and their emotions straight away. But if other men were to say to them what they saw in them, then
beautiful.
Wouldn't it be great?
Yeah.
What a different conversation rather than talking about the sport or the whatever else is going on. that
the safe topics.
The safe topics. Anyway, they're all different.
Well, it's that vulnerability, isn't it? Just to be vulnerable. You know, and this is just really quick, but like I was choosing an accountant, and there was this lady. She answered the phone, and the energy she was being when she answered the phone was like, oh, you know, okay, yes. and I was just like, yeah, that doesn't work for me, that energy. But what was so beautiful is it's not about going into separation, because that's what we do, right? And so I actually just dropped into exactly what you said. I just said, hey, are you okay? Is this a good time? And it just threw her. And so this is the gift of, you know, whether it's man speaking to a man, or you speaking to a potential client, or, you know, someone you might do business with. What if we actually were vulnerable enough to go, hey, you know, are you okay? What's up? And actually listen to the response, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Anyway.
What a gift, hey?
Yeah.
You worked with her. Yeah. All right, sweetheart. Well, thank you for that, and we'll chat again soon.
Yes, you survived, see? And thank you for the gift that you are. And I've just gotten so much out of today, so thank you. And all you guys listening in, if you would like to get in contact with either one of us, just go to choosinggreater.com and send us a message. Okay, take care, and we'll catch you when we catch you. Bye.